I'm talking and you're not hearing because my mic is muted. So let me try that again. Welcome into Random Cast or Friday live stream. My name is Timothy Barrett. I try to present when my mic isn't muted. I try to present this live stream every Friday, generally. Um, yeah, we're at part 6 of our series, Homeschooling May Save the Country. And if you're new to this series, you can go to the Bradford Christian College YouTube channel. You can click on playlists, you'll find Random Cast, and you can see the previous episodes in this series. In the intro, you saw a slide for Bradford Christian College. That's bradfordchristiancollege.com is the website you can go to find out more information on the bachelor degrees and the Master of Theology degree that's available through Bradford Christian College. It's an online college, but you are not left alone in your work. You're assigned a mentor who will walk with you through your program, challenge you with additional thoughts and questions in the classes you're taking, be there to help you understand better what it is you're learning, answer your questions about a particular class, and just walk with you through your program and help you stay on track and get that program completed as you would want. BradfordChristianCollege.com is the website. Visit that website, get the information, contact them with any other questions, and of course, go ahead and get enrolled and get started in your college program. Also, Covenant Academy Online. You can contact me at tbarrett@covenantacademyonline.com. tbarrett@covenantacademyonline.com. And I'd love to talk with you about any ways that I can help you in your homeschooling setting, with a homeschool co-op, with a church school, provide live online classes for whatever subjects you might need, ranging from grades 4 to grades 12. So if you're in a situation where you've got older students that need physics or chemistry or algebra 2, trigonometry, pre-calculus, some of those higher subject areas that maybe you're not feeling confident in, or in a co-op situation, you just don't have anybody that's willing to step up and provide instruction at that level, Covenant Academy Online can help. We can also help with some unique subject areas, maybe. I've taught forensic science a few times, an intro to law course, help students understand how the court system works, and learn some really practical legal type matters as well, practical things that they'll have to deal with in right off in their adult life, understanding rental agreements, understanding other kinds of contracts, and that sort of thing. So we can provide classes like that. Sometimes students want to study just the Cold War era or the Vietnam War or another particular war. We can do that. So tbarrett@covenantacademyonline.com. That's the email address. Send me an email and let me know, hey, I've got this situation. Is this something you could provide? How can we get this set up? And we'd love to do that. Whether it's 1 student or 30 students, I don't mind. I just would love the opportunity to interact with students that are eager to learn and would like somebody to walk alongside them and learn along with them. So, all right, enough about that. I mean to put this up immediately, but yeah, please do like now. Just go ahead and click the like now, and then you don't have to remind yourself to do it at the end, because now I'm saying it, you're hearing it. Let's do it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, be willing to share the video with others, and leave a comment below, and that will really help us out. All right. So what we've been doing in this series, these episodes up to this point, is trying to establish a biblically based philosophy for educating our children, taking authority, control of the education of our children, which, let me just say, it doesn't require, I don't believe it requires that parents be the only teachers of their children. Okay. Um, it's fine to have others teach your children. It does require for parents, biblically, for parents to take authority and responsibility for the education of their children. And there's no reason why parents should not enjoy the blessing, and especially in younger years, of being their children's teacher. I think you will, if you do this, you will find that uh, the connection that you will build with your children when you teach them to read is pretty special. You shouldn't miss that. Teaching your children the numbers and counting and simple addition and the connection that you build with your children is just um, amazing, and you should want that. Okay. And we'll talk more about that as we get into later episodes where we talk more specifically about a curriculum and what should we be doing and that sort of thing. Right now, what we're doing is we are considering what are some foundational principles that should shape the way that we think about our subjects, our education as a whole, so that we really do have a philosophy, all right? Because as we talk about in one of the previous episodes, the point of homeschooling is not to just copy what the public school does at home. In fact, everybody's homeschooling situation should be unique and should really not be looking to copy some pattern or program of education somewhere. The joy and the blessing of homeschooling is that you can enjoy the liberty of teaching your children the way that fits naturally into your home life, your work schedules. You can. There's absolutely no reason why. I mean, there may be good reasons why you should do something, but there's no reason why your homeschool day has to start at the same hour that the public school day starts. And there's certainly no reason why your homeschool day has to go as long as the public school day goes. Right? I mean, you may find that as far as depending on the ages of your children or whatever, but you may find that it works better in your home setting that the day is spent, while maybe dad's off at work, the day is spent with mom, just working with the children through the day of household chores and cleaning responsibilities and learning those disciplines. And then when dad comes home, there's a more typical school setting and dad teaches a subject or two when he comes home. I mean, be flexible, make it work in your natural family routine. And that's don't get caught up in, well, we have to do what are the public schools doing now? Oh, they're doing achievement testing. We better do achievement testing and such. Don't lock yourself into that. Let it be just an extension of, this is what our family does. This is what we do. We rake leaves and then we work on fractions. Like whatever. I mean, let it enjoy it that way. Okay, so as Christians wanting a biblical foundation for the philosophy of education that we're going to have, that probably makes sense to you. But I mean, there's 66 books in the Bible. Where do I get this? Well, here's the let's say my operating thesis for this. Okay, my operating thesis is that when God created Adam, He gave to Adam the things that Adam would need to know in order to be successful in the garden. Okay, um, because when Adam does sin and he falls, um, it'd be kind of weird or odd if Adam is, charged with sin and the fall, and Adam looked at God and said, "Well, you never told me that." Right? I mean, that would be kind of weird. It wouldn't even fit within how we understand God, right? Like, well, you never told me that. Right? How could you? And so the operating thesis is that God um, gave to Adam everything he needed to know to be successful. All right. So we're using Genesis 2:15 through 25, where God really is. This is really the instruction section where God says, Adam, here's everything you need to know regarding life in the garden. Now, the first thing we looked at was this right here in verse 15, to dress it. This was our principle number one. Okay. And principle number one, we're going to start making kind of a nice list here of our principles, but that wasn't a nice thing I did right there. Okay, so principle number one is the principle of character. All right. And we talked about it. You can go back to the last couple of episodes where we cover that first basic principle. And next to it, I'm just going to put the internal and external aspects. And if you're not clear what I mean by internal and external, go to the previous episodes and you'll see that. But character, okay, which, following the model of Christ, who was the express image or the character of the Father, we want to be the express image. We want to have the character, the mind, you could say, of Christ, right? It's really based upon internal faith and external work. And so we want, in the education that we provide, we want to be looking for opportunities to express this idea that we want to be people who live by faith, and we put that faith into practice and work. And we talked about math being a wonderful subject through which you can talk about this principle, right? We have faith in the formula or the process of solving a particular type of problem. We put faith in that, and we exercise that faith by following that process, actually producing the work that comes from that. And one of the things that we can come to understand is that sometimes in math, I don't really have a full understanding of the process or the formula. What is this? But I put faith in that formula and I follow it as I produce the work that comes out of that faith. It actually brings me back to that faith, and I begin to understand what it is that formula does or that process does, right? So this is faith with work. Okay, now our second principle, which we are kind of in the middle of talking about, is this phrase right here, to keep it. And here, our second principle is stewardship. And for stewardship, we're talking about how we take care of that with which we have been entrusted. Okay? How do we take care of that with which we have been entrusted? And here, internally, we have been entrusted with a conscience that we are to take care of. And then externally, we'll just use the word property, right? Material things that we enjoy, that we say we own, right? That is ours, our possessions. Okay, so that's where we're at so far. We are kind of in the middle of talking about this second principle, stewardship. Let me go up here to the notes that we had put down here about stewardship. We came to that principle of stewardship because This idea of keeping something is to guard it, to protect it, to attend to it. A steward is a keeper of a house. And this is where we kind of said a steward is somebody that knows and exercises house law, oikos nomos, which is the two Greek words we put together to get economics. And so as Christians, we should be good economists. And economics is not just about supply and demand. I mean, it's the fullness of the subject. In fact, most people probably kind of get glazed over eyes when I tell them I have a degree in economics. They're like nobody really wants to have to. It's called the dismal science for a reason, but most people think that that has to do with the economy, the government, and printing money or interest rates or the stock market, and certainly those things are part of it. Okay, but Webster defines the term economic as pertaining to the regulation of household concerns, managing domestic or public pecuniary concerns with frugality. All right, so in that second definition, he goes beyond the household concern, but the public concern. Pecuniary, just think money concerns, right? With frugality, that's an interesting word because his third definition of economic is frugal, not wasteful or extravagant. Now, the word economy is in his etymology of the word economy. That's where he points out the oikos and nomos, and he's the house law or the house rule. Primarily the management, regulation, and government of a family or the concerns of a household, the management of pecuniary concerns or the expenditure of money, a frugal and judicious use of money, that management which expends money to advantage and incurs no waste. So you can see that it should be part of our philosophy and the education of our children that they learn to be economists. They learn to be frugal and judicious managers of money, of household concerns. Okay, they learn to take care of those things that are their property. All right, now one of the things we noted was when we think about property, think about Adam's situation. Externally, his property was the garden, and that's what he was to care for, to guard, to retain in his power and possession. Let me see if I can pull this in. Let's see how this works. That's all right. I don't know how well you can see that, but this is James Madison's essay on property, and I thought it was worth reading this essay. Okay, so property. This term in its particular application means that dominion which one man claims and exercises over the external things of the world in exclusion of every other individual. In its larger and juster meaning, it embraces everything to which a man may attach a value and have a right, and which leaves to everyone else the like advantage. Okay, so now note this was written in 1792, right? The Constitution under which we live, 1787. Okay, so in the former sense, a man's land, merchandise, or money is called his property. In the latter sense, a man has a property in his opinions and the free communication of them. He has a property of peculiar value in his religious opinions and in the profession and practice dictated by them. He has a property very dear to him in the safety and liberty of his person. Okay, so think about the implications of what Madison is talking about here. Okay, a man has a property in his opinions and the free communication of them, right? What do we call that? Freedom of speech, right? He has a property of peculiar value in his religious opinions, profession and practice dictated by them. Congress shall make no law either establishing or prohibiting the free exercise of religion. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. He has a property very dear to him in the safety and liberty of his person. The right to keep and bear arms, right? I mean, it's just all right here. He has an equal property in the free use of his faculties and free choice of the objects on which to employ them. I mean, right to peaceably assemble, voluntary assembly, right? Certainly would be included in that. In a word, as a man is said to have a right to his property, he may be equally said to have a property in his rights. Now think about what we said about stewardship, okay? Stewardship, from this idea of keeping the garden, is not just to use it any old way, not to be abusive of it. It is to hold, to retain in one's possession. It is to hedge about, to guard, to protect, to attend to. Right? The idea is that whatever property we're talking about, to be a good steward is to make sure that it is used properly, okay? Not used any way it can be used, but used the way that it should be used, okay? Madison goes on, where an excess of power prevails, property of no sort is duly respected. No man is safe in his opinions, his persons, his faculties, or his possessions. Well, where would this excess of power come from? Okay, well, I think we're going to find that he's talking about civil government. He's talking about external government. When it's exercising an excess of power, property of every sort is not safe. Where there is an excess of liberty, the effect is the same, though from an opposite cause, right? So the excess of liberty is not, the effect is the same. Property is not safe. Because people have gone beyond true liberty and they are living in licentiousness. They're not practicing true liberty. They are wanting to be libertines, okay? And a libertine is someone who lives without restraint of the animal passion, one who indulges his lust without restraint, one who leads a dissolute, licentious life, a rake, a debauchee. Okay? So what Madison's saying here, there are extremes, excesses on, you could say, each side of the golden mean of true liberty. All right, he continues here. Government is instituted to protect property of every sort, as well that which lies in the various rights of individuals as that which the term particularly expresses. This being the end of government, the purpose, that alone is a just government which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. Okay, so that should be according to Madison, that should be the purpose here, to make sure that every citizen is secure in his property, not just the material things that he owns, but the rights that are his property, his opinions, his person, his faculties, his possessions, all of that. He continues, according to this standard of merit, the praise of affording a just securing to property should be sparingly bestowed on a government which, however scrupulously guarding the possessions of individuals, does not protect them in the enjoyment and communication of their opinions, in which they have an equal and, in the estimation of some, a more valuable property. Okay. And so what is he saying there? He's saying that government's doing a good job, that guards the possessions of individuals, but if they're violating the free speech, they're violating the rights, the property that people have in the right of forming opinions and freely communicating those opinions, they're falling short. That government falls short of being a just government. Then he writes, more sparingly should this praise be allowed to a government where a man's religious rights are violated by penalties, or fettered by tests, or taxed by a hierarchy. Okay, and so at this point, Madison is saying, all right, so like the minimum bar for a government being praised for what it's doing is when it demonstrates itself to meet the purpose of guarding possessions. But it's not a just government if it's not protecting freedom of speech, which is the enjoyment and communication of opinions. And it's even worse, it's even farther from being a just government if it doesn't guard the property of religious rights. If it violates those religious rights. That's what he's saying right here. More sparingly should this praise be allowed to a government where a man's religious rights are violated by penalties, or fettered by tests, or taxed by a hierarchy. And then he says this, conscience is the most sacred of all property. All right, and that's where we get the internal conscience, and then the external, the material properties. Other property, depending in part on positive law, the exercise of that being a natural and unalienable right. To guard a man's house as his castle, to pay public and enforce private debts with the most exact faith, can give no title to invade a man's conscience, which is more sacred than his castle, or to withhold from it that debt of protection for which the public faith is pledged by the very nature and original conditions of the social pact. Okay? So Madison is saying it doesn't matter how well you're doing as a government, right? How well you're doing the rest of your job. None of that gives you the right, or gives you the title to invade a man's conscience. And that's why it says Congress shall make no law. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where the property which a man has in his personal safety and personal liberty is violated by arbitrary seizures of one class of citizens for the service of the rest. In other words, that government that begins to trample on the right to keep and bear arms so that a person can guard their personal safety and personal liberty. Notice what he says here. A magistrate issuing his warrants to a press gang would be in his proper functions in Turkey or Indostan. under appellations proverbial of the most complete despotism. Okay, so um, um, so what was going on in Turkey in the 1790s? Okay, well, in the 1790s, Turkey was part of the Ottoman Empire, which was governed as an absolute monarchy and caliphate. It uh, was a Muslim country. um, and Madison was not impressed. He did not think highly of their form of government, staying with Indostan. As far as a government that despotic, not a government to be modeled after. I think in the 1790s, to some extent, there was a British rule in parts there, but he's probably referencing in particular the Mughal Empire. Um, but anyway, yeah, he's saying you don't, the idea of arbitrarily seizing citizens doesn't fit under the idea of a just government. Okay, he goes on. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exemptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens that free use of their faculties and free choice of their occupations, which not only constitute their property in the general sense of the word, but are the means of acquiring property strictly so called. Okay, so what is he talking about? What he's talking about is that there should not be artificial barriers of entry to occupations. In terms of the biblical terms, government should not be in the business of taking a man's mill and grindstone, right? His means of providing income. Okay. And when he talks about monopolies denying to part of its citizens that free use of their faculties, right? You think about potentially the extreme measures that might be put in place to license someone for particular work. And then think about professions that require some rigorous measure of licensure, and then think about, does that licensure, what does that ensure to us? What does that guarantee to us in terms of the service that is provided or the product that is provided? Let me give you one example. I don't think I qualify as a political junkie, but throughout my life, I have, not always, but I've followed, like the State of the Union address of the president or whatever. And I can remember when President Obama was in office, and one of the main focuses of his State of the Union address one year was about the daycare crisis in this country, and I was like, I never thought I would hear that topic at Washington D.C. Like, point to where in the Constitution you guys are supposed to be doing anything about daycare, okay? But apparently there's a daycare crisis. We just don't have enough daycare spaces, apparently. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that. There could be a lot of things that could be said to overcome that issue. But it seems to me that if there is a daycare crisis, a shortage of places for people to put their children while they do whatever they do, I think it could be solved tomorrow. I think it'd be really easy to solve that. You introduce a greater degree of liberty to the service. In other words, don't make it so hard to be a person that provides daycare. I mean, think about all the wonderful elderly people that live in your neighborhood. People that you probably already know and maybe like and have respect for, right? You've got an elderly lady who has raised her own children. You see her care for her 2 or 3 grandchildren, maybe. And if there were no rigorous licensure going on, she would be happy to open up her home and welcome in some of the neighborhood children to care for them for part of the day while mom runs errands, or whatever the case is. Mom and dad, maybe the mom and dad just think they both have to be at work to take care of the things they have to take care of, and so what do we do? But that, generally speaking, that can't happen in our current climate, because why? You've got to be a licensed daycare operator, and every person who works at that daycare has to be licensed to be a proper daycare worker. And then when we hear about terribly tragic circumstances regarding children and what may have happened to them, invariably a licensed daycare with licensed daycare workers. And it's like, what have we done? How have we protected ourselves? I would suggest it actually provides a false sense of security, because parents who are looking for a place to place their children, oh, you're licensed, you got licensed workers, so you must be okay. And they don't actually know the people. They don't get to know the people. They don't feel like they have to. Oh, you're licensed? Good. Here you go. When right across the street, right, there's a wonderful elderly lady, perfectly capable of caring for children during the course of a day, who sits alone, right? And instead of just sitting alone, she could have the joy of welcoming some children into her home, caring for them in love and in a grandmotherly way. And, now a family that's in a situation where they, for whatever reasons, they believe they need to have their children in daycare for the day, right? While mom and dad both work, or whatever the situation is. But they don't have to drive, way out of their way and dump them into a licensed daycare, right? You just walk across the street and say, "Oh, hi, Mrs. Johnson. Here's Billy and Susie. Have a good day." And they come home, and Mrs. Johnson walks the children across the street and says, "They were great today. Here you go." It'll be all right. That's what Madison's talking about. That we may well have put regulations into place that, in essence, are taking the millstone out of people's hands, and their ability to provide an income for themselves is hindered and perhaps even completely taken away because of such um, denial of the free use of their faculties and free choice of their occupation. What must be the spirit of legislation where a manufacturer of linen cloth is forbidden to bury his own child in a linen shroud in order to favor his neighbor who manufactures woolen cloth, where the manufacturer and wearer of woolen cloth are again forbidden the economical use of buttons of that material in favor of the manufacturer of buttons of other materials. Now, I don't know if he's talking about any particular things that were going on in the newly formed United States at that time, or if he's referencing something that was going on in the British Empire. I don't know, but think about all those rules. In fact, here's a story for you. This goes back some years when our government decided that the good old incandescent light bulb was not going to be produced anymore because it's an energy waster, and we're going to save the planet because we're not going to have the good old incandescent light bulb, which in my opinion produces the best kind of light for inside the house, and at the same time it provides some warmth when it's on. And so no, you had to, at the time it was compact fluorescent lights. I mean, now we're on LED lights and such, but at the time it was compact fluorescent lights. Well, I don't know if you know about fluorescent lights, but if you break it, it's considered hazardous, actually. In fact, there's a very detailed process that the government sets out as to how it is that you clean up the debris from a broken fluorescent light. Anyway, so our government has made this regulation, and there's a startup company in Kentucky, I believe it was, and they were going to produce compact fluorescent light bulbs, right? Because it's a need, right? And so, I mean, isn't this great then? You have an American company with American workers. They're going to produce an American compact fluorescent light bulb. And they got shut down because the government said, we can't have you doing that. It's too hazardous to handle those materials. And so what we're going to do is import them all from China, where we don't care that they're going to use children to produce these. All right, whatever. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that he's talking about here. That we put in these crazy regulations that end up hindering citizens from using the free use of their faculties and the free choice of their occupation. Madison goes on, a just security to property is not afforded by that government under which unequal taxes oppress one species of property and reward another species, where arbitrary taxes invade the domestic sanctuaries of the rich and excessive taxes grind the faces of the poor. Okay, so frankly, what Madison is talking about here, in part, is a progressive tax code, right? That says the more productive you are, the more real income you make, the more we take from you in taxes, because you have to pay your fair share. And it's only in the price of government that we demand that those who make more money pay a higher price for government. Okay, I mean, the prices in the store or at the movie theater, that they don't, at the movie theater, the price for their tickets, they don't put up, okay, if your income is over this amount, you're going to pay this much for the ticket. If it's between these amounts, you'll pay this much. And they don't do that. There's just a price for everybody. The rich and the poor pay the same price. But yeah, we notice that Madison, he's not just he's not a founding father who only cared about the rich. What he cared about was what was just. And it's not just to invade the domestic sanctuaries of the rich. Neither is it just to grind the faces of the poor with excessive taxes. Um, where the keenness and competitions of want are deemed an insufficient spur to labor, and taxes are again applied by an unfeeling policy as another spur in violation of that sacred property which heaven, in decreeing man to earn his bread by the sweat of his brow, kindly reserved to him in the small repose that could be spared from the supply of his necessities. All right, so in a beautiful way, what Madison is saying, we're way off base when we take away the heaven decreed spur to be productive for oneself, and we replace it by the handout that supplies the necessities for someone um, through taxation. Right? In fact, he says we're violating the sacred property that is present. What is the sacred property? That you earn your bread by the sweat of your brow. You don't earn your bread by the sweat of somebody else's brow. You know, we don't think that way in our country today. We don't think in terms of how it is that our welfare program actually violates a sacred property. And that sacred property is that you get out and sweat and earn your bread. Now, don't respond to that with, well, what if they can't work? Like, look, he's talking about the foundational principle, right? There are issues that have to be taken in place, but frankly, whatever other issues come up, I don't even know that Madison would say, well, okay, sure, there could be a situation where somebody's just unable to work. Well, who should take care of that person? Well, let's go to our spheres of jurisdiction. Family should do their best to take care of him, and then church should do its best to take care of him. And that person's family and that person's church should be sufficient to take care of him. It shouldn't have to go to the government. And the government shouldn't reach into those spheres of jurisdiction and take away their responsibilities in their jurisdiction. If there be a government then which prides itself in maintaining the inviolability of property, which provides that none shall be taken directly, even for public use, without indemnification to the owner, and yet directly violates the property which individuals have in their opinions, their religion, their persons, and their faculties, nay more, which indirectly violates their property in their actual possessions, in the labor that acquires their daily subsistence, and in the hallowed remnant of time, which ought to relieve their fatigues and soothe their cares, the influence, apparently it was unclear what word he wrote there, the influence will have been anticipated that such a government is not a pattern for the United States. Okay, this is a long sentence, but you know, we would do well to everybody who wants to run for political office, they should be required to read this essay, and that paragraph in particular, they should be required to study and study and study, and they shouldn't be eligible for office until they can, in their own words, express the true meaning of that paragraph. And it boils down to this, that any legislation or policy from any level of civil government that indirectly or directly violates the expanse of property that individuals enjoy is not a pattern for the United States. If the United States mean to obtain or deserve the full praise due to wise and just governments, they will equally respect the rights of property and the property in rights. They will rival the government that most sacredly guards the former, the rights of property, and by repelling its example in violating the latter, the property and rights, will make themselves, the United States, a pattern to that and all other governments. a great essay that needs to be read over and over again, to really understand, well, I would say to really understand the fullness of our inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that pursuit of happiness is a very particular intention, but it certainly includes enjoying the rights of property and the property and rights. And okay, so now this gets more particularly to government, because that's what James Madison was concerned about in 1792, was government and how it worked and such. But I wanted you to see this essay, because when we talk about this biblical principle of stewardship, and we talk about it in terms of all that God has given to us, right? When we hear the word stewardship, it's easy to think just about material things, right? Especially when we use the word property, we think about the house we own, or, you know, the car that we have. And certainly those things are included. But I would also want you to see that when we talk about stewardship, we're also talking about that which God has given us, right? And we put it here as conscience, but it would be proper for us to think about the rights that we enjoy. Okay, and you saw that in that essay, in the rights that we enjoy, Madison, without using the specific words, but he certainly referenced what we talk about often in this country: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to keep and bear arms. He certainly talked about those, but he also talked about other things. The idea that there should be liberty under a just government. There should be liberty for people to pursue the application of their gifts and faculties in the occupation of their choice. That arbitrary barriers of entry into occupations is not proper under a just government, right? It shouldn't. It should be, part of the marketplace, right? When I go to find somebody to practice medicine on me, right? It should be part of the marketplace that I take the time to get to know the person, and not just assume that, well, he's got the right government license to be doing this work, so he must be okay. Right? That is as much a violation of our sacred property as that violation that Madison talked about when we just default to a system where we we give handouts to people who are not properly stewarding the property, the sacred property of earning their bread by the sweat of their brow. Okay, so let's bring this to application within the homeschooling. This principle of stewardship, right? Many of these principles come to bear in how it is that we teach our children to be, in this case, responsible and accountable for their work. Okay, they are a bad steward, frankly, if on Monday they were told to complete 5 math problems, let's say, and then on Tuesday we're going to talk about them, and on Tuesday, oh, I haven't finished those yet. Or what's the classic line that students tell me? Oh, right, I got that done except for, it's like, well, then you didn't get it done. Got that done except for the last 2 problems. I didn't know what to do. It's like, well, then you didn't get it done. Don't falsify your report there. But no, we need to, as parents, right? We need to demonstrate this, okay? But I'm not going to. I'm not going to say that you can't hold your children accountable to a standard of being a good steward, until you're perfect at it. That's not the point, okay? Um, to give kind of a rough example, the dad that struggles with alcohol is not wrong to tell his children to not get drunk, okay? He's not wrong. Now he needs to not get drunk himself, obviously. But just because I know that I'm not a perfect steward of everything doesn't mean that I'm not able to call my children to the standard of being a good steward, right? And when my children say, "Well, yeah, Dad, but you didn't take care of, whatever, right? You didn't get the lawn mowed this week like you were supposed to." And, that's just an opportunity to, be real and say, "That's right, I didn't, and I should have. And so I fell short in my stewardship, and I need to do better." Um, just like you always need to do well. As dad, I would say, "See, I don't want you to be that kind of steward. I want you to be better than I was this week." Um, right. So, in one sense, then this biblical principle of stewardship is um, making it clear to our students that they need to live up to their responsibility, and they need to know that there is accountability. Okay, and so sometimes that accountability is a tough thing, right? But as mom or dad, um, it's time to give account for what you were responsible to do. And if they've fallen short, it's not okay to look at them and say, "Oh, well, you tried. It's okay." Um, they need to know what it means to fall short, and that there are consequences for that. That there's not just always a kind of blind forgiveness, right? I mean, certainly, depending on whatever the responsibility was, certainly, the part that they did well, good job here, but you should have finished it, right? Right? I mean, yeah, the desk in your room, you did get that organized and that looks good, but you should have done the rest of your room. And, they need to know that there is accountability uh, that follows the assigned responsibility. And so, in the actual content of a particular subject, I mean, certainly there will be opportunities to identify um, the concept of stewardship and responsibility, particularly in history, right? Where you can show that a particular person in history was not a good steward and the consequences that followed, or a circumstance where somebody was a good steward and the benefits that resulted from that. So you can show those things sometimes in content, but certainly, um, when little Tommy comes to the table and his notebook for literature is just a mess, right? It's not in order. Um, some of the holes on the pages are ripped, so the pages don't fit right in the. Like, what have you been doing with your notebook? You're not being a good steward of your notebook, right? That's as much a teachable moment, and just as important a teachable moment as, you know, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It's like it's important too, and we want to be mindful of those opportunities. And I'll bring it back to Adam and his responsibility to be a steward of the garden. I'm just going to suggest, as the narrative is given in Genesis, Adam just seems to be standing by while Eve is being deceived by the serpent, and he's not being a steward of his wife. He's not being a steward of his garden. And had he been diligent in that, the story could have been very different. And we don't want that glaring weakness in our children. And so take care of the notebook that you're using for literature, or make sure your math papers are neatly arranged so that when we're talking about a particular problem, we can follow your work, see what you did, see the steps that you took. And that's how you live up to your responsibility to do the math problem well. And that's how the accountability part can go so much better for you. Because if you don't show your work, or things are written scattered all over the page so it can't be followed, the accountability at that point is, I have no idea what you did. You can't demonstrate to me the steps you took to work this problem. You're not being a good steward of this problem. So those are opportunities to really exercise this principle of stewardship. And just think about these first two principles. If we can be diligent in forging character in our children, and helping them to grow in their stewardship skills, quite frankly, that's going to do more for them in their future life than all the dates of events in history that they can memorize, right? I mean, all right. I think I've said enough about that. So we've got through our first two principles then. Genesis 2:15, dressing the garden and keeping the garden. So next episode, we'll move on to principle number 3, and we'll be looking at the first command that God gave to Adam, and what principle that sets down for us to follow. So thanks for being a part of this episode. Please, let's see if I can do this right here. I'm trying to handle the technology. Please do like, subscribe, and share the video with others. Leave a comment below, and I appreciate that. And if you have any questions you want to ask, please do so. And I will love to have a discussion with you about, or be corrected by you about anything that I happen to share in this episode. But thanks for being a part. And we'll continue, Lord willing, next week in our series on homeschooling may save the country. And we'll be excited. Maybe I will be excited. I hope you'll be excited to find out what principle number 3 is next time. So thanks for watching, and God bless.